From the Zimmermann Symphony Center in Canton, Ohio, this is Orchestrating Change. I'm Matthew Jenkins Yarashevitz, Associate Conductor of the Canton Symphony Orchestra.
And I'm Rachel Hegemeyer, Manager of Education and Community Engagement.
Welcome to our podcast, and thank you for joining us.
This podcast will navigate the issues that exist in the field of classical music and the world at large. We invite you to listen with open ears as our guests share their experience as underrepresented professionals in the music industry.
This week, we are joined by Jeff Talbert, Superintendent of Canton City Schools. He has previously served as Superintendent of Alliance City Schools, also here in Stark County, in addition to positions with the Cleveland Heights University Heights and Osnaburg local school districts. Before that, he was the principal at McKinley High School, right next door to us here at the Zimmermann Symphony Center. He has also been a classroom teacher and football coach, having played the sport during his 4 years at Muskingum College. Jeff is a Canton native and proud alumnus of the district he now leads. Jeff Talbert, welcome to Orchestrating Change.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, we're so excited to talk to you today. So just starting right off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to pursue a career in education?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, I was born and raised here in Canton, Ohio, and didn't set out to go into education. When I was a young man, of course, you wanted to follow your dream to be an athlete, or I remember wanting to be a corporate lawyer. But after I got into college, I started to realize the role that a group of dedicated educators played on my life. And decided that, you know what, I wanted to give back. I was blessed with two parents who knew they wanted me to get an education, to get a college degree, but neither one of them had the opportunity to go past 8th grade. And so they knew to push me to study hard and get good grades, but when it came to getting to that next level, they didn't know how to do that. And I was able to do that. Simply because there were dedicated teachers at Timken High School who went above and beyond to help me navigate that process. And once I got to college, it was a no-brainer. I realized that I wanted to be that person for the next set of kids growing up in the city of Canton. So that's kind of what inspired me to do what I do today.
Absolutely. So you started out in the classroom, of course, but eventually you transitioned to the administrative side where you've been for quite some time. Tell us about that transition.
Well, it's amazing how quick the time has gone. But I started off in the classroom, really enjoyed the time that I spent working with kids, coaching them, and working in the classroom. Again, trying to make that impact. And then one day, a mentor of mine, the superintendent of Osnaburg local, Mel Leoy, brought me in and said, Jeff, she goes, I can tell that you're in this for the right reason. You want to help kids. And I said, I do. And she goes, in your position, you're going to have the kids that you're working with in your class, and then the 60 or so boys you're working with on the field. How would you like to impact all 1,000 students of this district? And I said, well, how do you do that? She goes, you do that by going into administration. And so she kind of pushed me into an aspiring administration program. And I really was drawn into that field. The similarities to coaching and leading a group of people were very attractive to me. That's where I feel I get my inspiration and my energy, from leading a group of people and helping them perform to the best of their abilities. And so I went into that, and shortly after that, I received my first opportunity to be a middle school assistant principal in the Woodridge local schools.
Yeah, it's so fun. I will maybe get to this, but the analogies between sports and music are very similar. The language you use about performing, getting a group of people for the same goal, I just think it's very interesting.
Absolutely. And not only that, I had a friend of mine once who is a professional cellist who told me there's really nothing else like being a professional musician other than being a professional athlete. You do what you do the same thing over and over from a young age. You kick a soccer ball, you hit a baseball, you play the cello from a young age, and just practice until you get to the highest level.
And you being a coach is kind of like you being a conductor of leading the group of people. And
go.
I just think it's really fun.
Trying to get that group of people to act in unison, and to understand that it's their role, that they have an individual role to play, but it's not about their individual role. It's about how that individual role fits into the entire piece.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
so it's very, very, very similar.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that I do as superintendent, of trying to get, we call it getting all arrows aligned and heading in the same direction.
Yeah.
And making sure that it happens.
And you've worked for a lot of different school districts with very different challenges and unique perspectives that they each bring. So can you tell us a little bit about all the different districts that you have worked in and the unique challenges that they each had to face? So
I've been in 3 districts in Stark County, Canton City Schools, Plain Local Schools, and Osnaburg Local. So I've worked as a teacher in the largest school district, Canton City. I've worked as a teacher in Plain, which is more of a suburban district. And then I've worked as a teacher in a rural district in the smallest school district in the county. I've been an administrator in the smallest, and now back in the largest as an administrator. I've worked in the inner ring suburb as a principal in Maple Heights and as an assistant superintendent in Cleveland Heights, so inner ring suburb of Cleveland. And I've worked in Peninsula and Woodridge local schools. So I've had the opportunity to see just about every environment in education that you can possibly see. Had the opportunity to learn from great administrators and great teachers in all those different types of districts, which again allows me to be able to adapt to several situations that I've seen in my chair as superintendent. And I really appreciate all the folks that I've worked with and all those different experiences I've had in my life. I've been pretty blessed to have those opportunities, and to have those opportunities by choice, not because someone was forcing me to go to different places.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is a big question for you. We have a constant conversation about the state of public education across the country. What is your view of the current state of the public education system at all levels, national, state, and local?
Well, I think we're at a tough crossroad right now in public education. There's the one road that is where we were headed before the pandemic, and then now where we are because the pandemic has kind of forced us to take a different path. And I'm real interested to see where we come up policy-wise after we get on the other side of this pandemic. But where we were headed in the pandemic, for me, I don't believe is a particularly good place. I think that education, for the sake of accountability, has gotten into the place where we're creating one type of education for one group of kids and another type of education for another group of kids. If you, for some reason in your life, whether it's because of poverty, because of something else that you faced with trauma in your life, are starting from a different point than where the state says people should typically start, then you receive a different type of education. You are tested and drilled and skilled and killed until you can get a specific score on a specific test at any given time. And that changes, that changes the things that you're exposed to. I like to call it, like in schools where the districts aren't receiving great scores, the district kind of has to shift its way to chasing threes, which is proficient on the test, instead of working to prepare kids for life, college, and careers. And so, you go into school districts where they're meeting the state standards, they're teaching kids robotics, and they're teaching kids employability skills, and they're able to work on that. But the other school districts are, I've got to get you a 3 so I can get you out of school and get you a diploma. And that looks a little different than the other place. And so I'm not against accountability, but I think we need to look at how we judge that. Nowhere in life, I use this example of swimming. when you go to the Y and you look at a swim class, if a kid walks in, two kids walk in, and one's 4 and another one is 8, and neither one of them has been in the pool, we're going to start them at the beginning class, right? Everybody starts at tadpoles or minnows. You don't just say, well, nope, you're 9, you need to go jump in 5 foot of water, whether you swam or not. Like that's not what we do. But in education, that's what we do. It doesn't matter if you've never seen a book at the age of 8, you are expected to be here when you're 9. Right. And if you're not, you're titled as a failure. And it's about the journey. And that's what we're about in the Canton City Schools. We're going to be about the journey. Yeah. We're going to take you from where you start. But when you walk across the stage, we're going to make sure you're ready for life, college, and careers. And so that's my fear. Right now in the pandemic, people have kind of come together. We've put some of that on pause, and we've understand that we have to be about taking care of one another, and that's going to be a different plan for each individual district, and people are celebrating those differences, and it's okay. Yeah. And if we can move on from there and continue that way, that will be great. But what I've seen in my 20 plus years in education, that's not going to happen. We have to find a way to put schools up against one another, and we have to have winners and losers. And so we're going to hopefully, and I guess not to our benefit, revert back. And I hope we don't, but that's what I've seen during my time.
Yeah. And I love all of what you just said, and I think it's really important for people to hear, because I feel like a lot of the general public doesn't really understand how the public education system works, and that includes all the different facets of where the policies come from, the curriculum, the test scores you have to meet, all of these different nuanced things that school districts have to do. And a big part of the education system, the public education system in America, is funding and how schools are funded. And could you, for our audience members who don't maybe know how public education is funded, could you explain how that works and how it impacts the different schools differently?
So the major part of Ohio's funding, and this is the part they're going back and forth about, is property taxes and your community's ability to build or collect revenue through the values of their property. Then each school receives per pupil funding based on what they're able as a community to provide for, I guess, to meet the gap. So the state kind of meets that gap from what you're able to do as a community. The state comes in and kind of meets that based on a per pupil expenditure. Now there's a formula that the state has to do that. The current formula, 80% of the districts aren't on it. You are either capped, right? Or you're on a minimum amount of money. You're on a guarantee, they call it. And so the argument we're having right now is like, we got to create a formula that actually works, right? Because the formula currently doesn't work. You're either, hey, the formula brings you too much money, like Canton City Schools, because of our number of kids in poverty, the number we have identified with special needs, the ability of our district, the low ability of our district to actually fund our schools from our property taxes, we would get in the formula way more money than we actually get. So they say you're capped, right? So we're not getting the amount of money that we should get to educate our kids. Because if they gave us all the money we need, then there wouldn't be enough money to support the other schools. And those other schools, the formula says for them that you should receive less money than you get. And those schools, of course, are upset by that, because that was a change. So then, okay, well, you're on a guarantee not to get less than what you got way back some time ago. And so we all know that plan doesn't work, and they're working on a fair funding plan, a balanced formula that will work. But we're going to have to agree on that, because that's going to cost billions of dollars more than what we're paying in education right now. Yeah. And some folks don't agree with that. But what happens in a district like Kansas City, 80% of the money we receive comes from the state of Ohio. So what we use to operate as a school district, again, 80% of it comes from ODE. The other amount comes from our local tax dollars. And what happens for us, and what is definitely hurting us right now, is that after we get that 80% and we spend 80% of our total funding on people, So after we pay our people, there's 20% of our revenue left. That 18% of that 20% is spent on paying tuition at charter schools and non-pubs.
Oh
Right.
gosh.
So that's what we have left to operate with. And
Really?
so when you hear us say we have to downsize, we have to right size, we have to cut programming, it's because we only have so many dollars, right?
Wow.
And our dollars are tied directly to what the state says. So if the governor says we're going to hold education funding flat while everything else in life goes up, then we have to shrink our budget a little bit. If the governor says, hey, we're going to cut education by 3%, that's the lion's share of where our revenue comes from.
Yeah.
And so we can't go out and tax our way out of this. In other districts, they will say, oh, we're losing money from the state. Let's put a levy on. And eventually it'll go down maybe a couple of years, but eventually they'll get it. And we've been fortunate. Our community have supported our levies, but we would have to put a number on so large when it comes to millage that people would say, oh, there's no way we're going to give you that. And so it's better off for us to kind of right size our district, be fiscally responsible, live within our means, and provide a first-class education. And that's the restructuring plan that we're working on right now, or right in the middle of, is designed to do all that, so that when families make a choice in this community, that choice is us, which will kind of help the money that we're hemorrhaging out to non-pubs and to charters.
Wow.
Absolutely. So you alluded to this already, but Canton City Schools is one of the poorest districts in the state and even comparatively in the country as well. Tell us about the challenges that come with educating a population that in many cases their basic needs, such as food and shelter, sometimes aren't being properly met.
Right. It means that's the first thing we have to take care of. You're not worried about 2 + 2 = 4 if you don't have food and you're worried about being hungry. If you know that you're not going to go home you don't know where you're going to go home, or your home isn't safe. And so kids bring that to school. They don't drop that at the door when they come in. And so we and our staff do a really good job of taking each kid daily, understanding some of the things they're faced with, and then going above and beyond to meet the needs of our kids. We do everything from making sure they get a hot breakfast in the morning, to a lunch, to even sometimes dinner. We try to provide transportation whenever we can provide transportation. Right now in the pandemic, we provide everyone with a device, but we also provide 40% of our students with broadband internet service that they can take home and use, so that they're able to connect. We do laundry. We have facilities in our buildings where students can do laundry, and we're looking at ways to do that. There's nothing that we don't do to make sure that we can remove barriers so that kids can come to school, feel safe, and to learn. And that has to be our number one priority. The kids can do it. There's no doubt they have the same capabilities as other students. We just have to understand that there may be something else on their mind. Older kids are also responsible for little brothers and sisters, and so they might spend time doing that. We have students that have to work, and because they have to chip in to support their family, and so we have to look at that and understand that could be something that's getting in the way of them participating in a normal school day. And so I think that what we've learned through this pandemic, we've learned to be flexible. We've learned that our students all live a different type of life, especially those older kids. We've got students who are working all day at Amazon and then logging on at night to work on their schoolwork. We've got kids that are working late nights at Walmart and logging on late afternoon to do their work. And so we've discovered all these things, and these things aren't just happening because of the pandemic. These are things that our students have been doing. And so when we see kids are missing from school and they have high attendance rate, it's not because they don't value education. It's because they have other things right now that may be pressing in their life. And so we have to be flexible to say, hey, we know what you're going through. We're going to kind of make this education fit your lifestyle because we know that this is going to help you in the future reach your dreams and your goals.
Yeah. And we know that the cycle of poverty in America is almost impossible to break. And education is such a key part just because of the way our society is set up with how you get employed and the skill sets that are needed. But it's not necessarily college always is the thing. You know, college is the thing that it's like you have to go to college to get a job. You have to all do this. But education at any level and preparedness just for life is really what it sounds like you all are focusing at Canton City Schools. So what can you tell our audience about the ways that you are preparing students to try and break that cycle of poverty and giving them the tool set so that they can stay in this community and make it an even better place for the future?
Well, I think the biggest thing we do, one, is our career tech program and trying to get kids trained in a skill so that they can go out and get a high paying job when they leave. Also, giving our kids the opportunity, especially our high school kids, the opportunity to take college credit while they're in school so that they can receive the support from us. College is a hard thing to adjust to for some folks. It's a different world. And so leaving high school and going straight to college and being on your own sometimes we're setting kids up to fail. So allowing them to do some of that and learn how to navigate the college scene while they're in school helps them. We have a program that's called Early College. It's one of few early college programs in the state of Ohio. Mm-hmm. And every year we have a group of kids who graduate with both a high school diploma and an associate's degree. Yeah. And that's a great plan. They graduate with both. They are well on their way to getting a 4-year degree if that's something they would like. The degree is through Stark State, so some of them have already moved pretty close to getting a credential, a certificate that they can use to gain employment. And so we have to continue to do things like that. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to continue to help kids make connections. Mm-hmm. As a kid growing up, my father used to say that sometimes, son, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Yeah. And so when you think about kids growing up, and we say you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and it's like, well, that's nice of you to say, but what do you say to the person who doesn't have boots? And so when we look at our kids and we say that some of our kids don't have the connections that they need so that they can take their education and go to the next step. And so that's when, you can have a bachelor's degree in something, but if you're not able to get inside the door, mm-hmm. then you're not going to use that bachelor's degree. And so that's the kind of the next phase we have to do. And there's some great things going on in Stark County, mm-hmm. And with the chamber and strengthening Stark and other groups mm-hmm. that are really looking at how can we get into the city, create mentors for these students so that our students have the opportunity to meet people who can support them and give them advice and open doors for them. Yeah. Because that's the difference. And I think as our community becomes more polarized and becomes a little, I live in Canton, that's where I stay, and I live in North Canton, and I don't go down to Canton, and I live in Massillon, and I don't go to Canton. Like the kids, even though they're connected through social media, that's not the real world. They don't get to go see where you live every day and meet your parents and do those things. And I think back during my days that's how a lot of doors opened for me. It was through people that I've met through other people and had that opportunity to interact with. Mm-hmm. And so we have to do that as well. We have to make sure that our kids are able to develop the network that will allow them to take the tools and the skills that we're giving them to apply them somewhere. Right.
My brother has a great saying. It's not about the grades you make, it's the hands you shake.
That's a true story. That's a true story.
The longer I lived, the more I realized that yep. in music or whatever business you may be in, just how true it is. So this is, of course, a podcast produced by the Canton Symphony Orchestra. So let's talk a little bit about music for a bit. A lot of studies show that music programs in schools help kids succeed in other areas as well. Stark County has some wonderful music programs. We have the privilege of working with the students in our youth symphony program. But across the board, in many, many places, music programs are being cut due to lack of funding. How do we make sure that our arts programs are being properly supported?
Well, one, I think it's imperative that leaders see the value in those programs, that people continue to advocate for arts programs and for the funding. And even, as leader of the Kansas City School District, in the time where we are reducing, we are trying to make sure we build those opportunities. When one of my boys was going to school, we went to an orientation for middle school, and I heard a band director say, says, how many of you guys want your students to be on the honor roll? Everybody in the room raised their hand, and the guy said, how many of your students want your child to be in National Honor Society? And everybody raised their hand. And he said, how many of you want your kid to be in the top 10% and to go on and receive academic scholarships? They raised their hand. Then I want you to know that you should probably put them in band. And Then he started to talk about how successful all the kids are in band. And I don't believe that's just a coincidence. I think that the discipline that it takes to play and to play an instrument, to be successful with playing an instrument, the amount of practice time is something that you're able to apply to other areas of your life. And it's like we talked about earlier with athletics, the discipline that it takes to get up every morning and to do a practice routine, or to follow the training regimen that you have to train to be a high performing athlete, transcends into other parts of your life, and you just can't turn it off. Mm-hmm. And so athletics aren't things that people aren't all attracted to being athletes. There are some folks who are interested in the arts and they're interested in music. And so if we're able to find a way to pique your interest, whether it's visual arts, performing arts, and vocal music, instrumental music, then as a school district, we have to do that. We know that kids who are connected to school in some way do better. Mm-hmm. And so we want to, and even go as young as we possibly can, find a way to connect to the interests of the student. And that's why I believe music is so important, and to have, and that's why we're looking to expand it in the Kansas City School. Mm-hmm.
And on this podcast, we've talked a lot about the pipeline of students, specifically students of color, into orchestras, because we see a lack of diversity in orchestras. And a lot of this starts at the very beginning, because unfortunately in America, school districts that experience more poverty also tend to be more students of color, because that's just the reality of America right now. But what are the challenges that urban school districts face specifically? And you've touched on this a little bit, but trying to get these robust arts programs so that these students of color can succeed later in life and pursue music if that's what they want to choose to pursue.
There's a few, I think, roadblocks in the way. One, of course, is just, because of poverty, there's the funding and the availability of resources. That's a hurdle that we have to overcome, and finding a way to get instruments in the hands of the students. Another thing that you have to overcome is allotting the time, and being able to allot the time in the day, so the students can get that training, because it's even more it's difficult for them to get it after school and before school. So trying to find that time during the day, and the district has to make it a priority to give them that time, and finding a way to get quality instructors in the facility who understand that you're not going to have Beethoven on the first day, right? And you're gonna have to work with these kids, and they're not gonna be able to go home and have hours of practice time, and so they might take them a little longer to get to where. And it's about exposure, and I think that's the second one: exposure, exposing our kids to something different. You only know what you know what you see. And so music is a big part of all of our students' lives. But our students have a particular ear because of what they see. As a former DJ, I listen to all sorts of music. And so I've had to play all sorts of music. I was on in college, the station was a rock and a classic rock station. Even though I had a show where I was allowed to play rap music for 2 hours a week, back in the early 90s. But I had to learn to play country music and to have some classical music for dinner music. And so I was able to develop an ear for music that I don't listen to. That's not the music that I listen to on a regular basis, but I can appreciate other forms of music and other genres. And so we have to find a way to expose our kids to other genres and to other instruments, and to see that, there's more than a guitar, there's more than a drum. That there's more than a piano and an organ, because for a lot of our kids, that's what they grow up seeing in church.
Yeah.
They'll see a drum, they'll see a guitar, they'll see an organ, they'll see a piano, and sometimes that's what they want to play. But to give them that exposure to a violin and how cool a violin can be. In my prior district, we brought in a violinist, and his name is slipping my mind, but he came every year, and he had electric violins, and I mean, he was amazing. And the amount of people who came out and the amount of young students who left that auditorium that night wanting to pick up a violin, it grew every year. It allowed that district to have a great orchestra program. And so it's creating opportunities like that for kids at a young age, for them to see that, hey, here's an instrument that you might not have seen before, and here's how cool that instrument can be. There was something that was done with the symphony, and I brought my daughter to it, and she thought it was the greatest thing. It was when gospel meets the symphony. It was done at Umstead Hall. My daughter got to go to that, and it really spurred her on to having a musical career and seeing that there could be something different. I think there's opportunities like that where we can bring our kids and they can see that, that there's other instruments than they're used to. There's other types of music than they're used to, and it's all pretty cool. And once we do that, and they see that there's other things out there, we'll have kids who will gravitate to that.
So you, of course, as we've mentioned, you are not a classical musician yourself, but what is your relationship to the classical music community, and what are your views on the orchestral world currently?
Well, way back when, a long time ago, I played the violin for a second. And so, again, I appreciate the skills that it takes to go into that. I've never been or consider myself a musician, but I appreciate it. And so my I guess my ties are more into knowing that it's a way for us to create opportunities for students. And I know that we have students in our school who that's what interests them, and that's what motivates them. And I believe our job is to create pathways for students to be successful. And so we want to create all the pathways. And so whether you are a writer, whether you are a musician, whether you're going to write music, whether you're going to play music, whether you are in the construction trades, whether you are a speaker, you have a great speaking voice and you love the debate, whether you're an athlete, right? Whether you just don't know, there's kids who I just don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that the Canton City School District has a place for you to build on the skills that you have or the interests that you have, so you can be whatever you want to be. And I felt that the school district that I went to many moons ago here in the district did that, and it had a lot of choices. And I think we still do. I believe that in my time in this chair, my goal is to expand on that. And so one of the things that I saw that we could do was to create our opportunities for our students in the performing arts a few grades lower, so that training age, again, I think training age is really important. So if we can start them in the 3rd and 4th grade, instead of the sixth grade.
Yeah.
That's 2 to 3 more years of training, which, and this is what usually happens. I go and I perform in public with other people who've been playing longer. I get embarrassed. I put the instrument down.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get this done. And instead of, that work ethic of, okay, I'm gonna go back and be better. It's like, they're so much better than me, then I'm not going to take my instrument out of, out of the case, because I will be embarrassed.
Yeah.
And so we hope that we're going to be able to increase the training age of our students, which again will give them more opportunities as they get older, which with those opportunities will give them exposure to a different world. And it might be something that they continue on to do even after they leave high school.
Yeah. And I love all of that. And I think that's really important to know. And, Canton City Schools is one of the few school districts in this area that does have a string program. And we're lucky enough to work with the strings instructor, because she does work with the youth symphonies with us, and she's amazing. But I know we only have a couple more things here. So can you tell our audience, how can institutions like the Canton Symphony Orchestra and just the general public support public education, support the Canton City Schools, and just support the arts in their local school districts, wherever they're at?
Well, one, I think we need to put pressure on our folks in government to continue to fund education, to fund all parts of education, to make sure that it is about educating the whole child. And that, I think that's really important, to talk to them about, hey, we want accountability, but we want accountability that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
We want accountability that allows the school district the flexibility to educate, again, that entire child, whether that's social, that's emotionally, that's artistically, right, athletically, that we have the ability to do that without being dinged or punished because some kids start later than others. And I think that's a real big push. And also get involved, get involved, whether it's your time, whether it's helping to raise money. Like, our students are going to need instruments. We're going to have to do that. That's where the cost is, and help us raise the type of money to do that. And then partnerships, like with the symphony, and we have to continue to build those partnerships. I worked in Cleveland Heights, as you mentioned, and there was an organization there called Reaching Musical Heights, or Reaching Heights, and that organization put together a tremendous event for our students to play. What's the hall in Cleveland?
Severance Hall.
Severance Hall, and it's amazing to see young kids, young vocalists, instrumentalists, just to play in that venue every year. And it was something that the kids worked really hard for. But what I saw there was a whole city approach to music, and it was something. It was the first time my eyes were open. I remember getting across my desk as assistant superintendent a purchase order for like a $10,000 or $11,000 saxophone, and I was like, "Are you crazy?" and then my boss came in and said, "Okay, let's go take a trip to the high school music room." And we went to the high school music room, and there were 4 or 5 adults in there. There were teachers coming in who were in private practice, and who came in to assist students with their sectionals, so that, because the teacher was not, certified to teach at that level for that instrument. So they brought someone in off the street, and no one was offended by that. And everybody felt like, hey, we need to have this first class program. To go up there, we had and this is something folks in Stark County might not understand, but the football team made the playoffs for the first time in school history, and had a game on Friday night, which happens to be the opening night of the musical. And coming from Stark County, I was like, well, maybe we need to postpone the musical, and they were like, maybe we need to postpone the game. The game went on, but the game had to start early and end early, so we could have parking for the sold out musical, right? Yeah. And then you had football players who did the musical, and everybody understood that arts were important and they were equally as important. And that was a good 3 years for me. And I think that's changed how I've developed as a leader to know that, hey, we can engage so many kids if we build a robust arts program. There are a lot of kids who will connect with school if we allow them to create music. And as I look back and I look at kids today, whether it's writing music, writing songs, kids with the rap music, writing lyrics, it's music is that thing that connects everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You go to college football practices now, there's music playing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's a reason for that. And the coaches will tell you that. I don't know, they focus longer. That a coach will tell you like, hey, they just focus longer.
Yeah.
Well, there's something about music, and it's something that relates to everyone. And I think, again, if we can find those kids and find out what the way that we can connect with them to get them to see that, hey, I like school because school is where I get to do this and this. And I think music can do that. And so if we can create opportunities for kids, again, and also create exposure to kids to a different lifestyle. And if that is being in the orchestra, that's going to expose them to something that they normally wouldn't see growing up in the city of Canton. Mm-hmm. And who knows what it can do for them in the future.
Yeah.
So our podcast is called Orchestrating Change, of course. So before we let you go, any final thoughts on how we orchestrate change going into the future?
Well, I think we have to continue to work together. And I think that's the biggest part of change. When you go through that change process, understanding that you are going to wade out into the weeds. And that when you get out into the weeds and you look behind you and you really can't see where you came from and you really can't see where you're going, you have to have the courage to move forward. And I think that's what we have to do in the city is that right now we're at a place where, hey, we're in a scary place where we really don't know what's ahead of us, but we know that what's behind us is someplace we really don't want to be. Mm-hmm. So we need to reach out, support one another, look for ways to connect with each other so that we can all be stronger and take that first step to move forward. So I'm looking forward as superintendent here to continue to build partnerships. It's a big job to educate all the students of the city of Canton, and it can't be done with one entity. I think that this community has a lot of organizations who are willing to help, and we are looking forward to accepting that help. And then our biggest challenge is going to be, okay, how do we align all these different resources we have and get all the arrows going in the right direction, and so that we can move forward successfully.
Wow. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm looking forward to doing stuff with the Canton City Schools. I know we do some stuff already, but I'm ready to see how the symphony can get in more classrooms and do even more stuff in the future. But so thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to it as well. Our intermediate buildings next year, you will see the schedules are really set up. We're designing the schedules so that time is there. So there will be time every day, about 90 minutes every day that the kids have for exploratory arts.
Yes.
That's set up for that, and there will be after school programs. So we have a complete and empty I'm looking for an artistic word, but we have a palette that's there. It's ready to be drawn on or painted on. So we're looking forward to bringing you guys in to help us.
Awesome.
We've been speaking with Jeff Talbert, Superintendent here at Canton City Schools.
Orchestrating Change is a production of the Canton Symphony Orchestra.
Our theme music was composed by Eric Gould and performed by Derek Snyder and Tim Adams.
Our audio engineer is Nathan Maslick.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.